Well, you seem to like to laugh when we start our services, so here's how we will begin again. There were two brothers. They were multimillionaires, and they were not nice guys. And one of them passed away, and he went to the preacher and he said, hey, look, I want you to do my brother's funeral, but I want you to say that he was a saint. And if you'll say that he was a saint, and y'all been to funerals like that, right? You've heard funerals, you're sitting there and you're going, I don't know who you're talking about, but it ain't that guy. But anyway, he said, I want you to say that my brother was a saint, and if you do, I'm going to donate $1 million to your church. So the preacher said, all right. So he got up, and he was doing the funeral a few days later, and he said, I want everybody to know here that this man in front of me was an absolute reprobate. He was one of the worst men that have ever lived. He was a liar, a thief, a cheat, and a felon, and a fraud. However, in comparison to his brother, he was a saint. There's one way to get $1 million, right? Well, today we are studying the story of Gideon in our Great Stories of the Bible series. 3,200 years ago, the Israelites had done what they tend to do, like Mark referenced today. They go through cycles of ungodliness, and at the time of Gideon, they were very, very evil in God's eyes. And so God decided that he was going to put them under the control and the domination of the Midianites. Now, the Midianites came about from Abraham and his second or third wife, Keturah. After Sarah died, he married Keturah, and he had 6 sons. One of them was Midian. And so when the Israelites are under Midianite control, they're really being controlled by kinfolk, just a whole lot of generations back and a lot of separation in the family. Nonetheless, the Midianites were known for horrible things. They were terrible people. These were people that were absolutely ungodly. They practiced child prostitution. They practiced child abuse. They killed their children as sacrifices. They were just about as ungodly as you get. They had no moral compass whatsoever. And God puts the Israelites under their control for 7 years. Now, there's a lesson to be learned in that, and I'm going to be pulling lessons out of the story as I tell it to you today, and this is Judges chapter 6 through chapter 8. But one of the lessons is, folks, when we go through hard times, don't always think that's Satan. There's times in our lives when we go through hard times, and God will use those tough times to get our attention. So when we go through hard times, if we'll look for God's grace, it's always there. You will find God's grace in every circumstance if you look for it, and when you find it, that will help you get through the situation a whole lot easier. And so in tough times, begin to look for God. And so the Israelites were underneath the Midianites, and man, they're hiding in caves, they're living in strongholds, they're hiding in forest places. It's terrible. The Midianites will go through and they'll camp on top of their farmland and destroy their planted crops. They'll burn their fields. They're killing all of their livestock. So it's a horrible time to be an Israelite. So they do what they ought to do. God gets their attention, and they cry out to God for help. Another lesson, folks. When you get in trouble, when you're really hurting, when life is painful, cry out to God. A lot of us tend to go cry out to a whole lot of other places. But cry out to God when you find yourself in trouble, and God hears them. Sometimes God speaks in a still, small voice. Sometimes God speaks through myriad ways. But C.S. Lewis said one of the things God does is God shouts in a storm. They cry out to God, God hears, and God speaks to them. And basically what God initially says is, I am the God that brought you out of Egypt. I'm the one that split the sea. I'm the one that did the miracles, but you folks didn't listen. I was talking, I was speaking, I was acting. You didn't listen, and that's why you find yourself where you are. And so an angel comes to old Gideon. Now, where's Gideon at when the angel comes? And folks, there's a lot of humor in this story. There's just a lot of funny stuff in this story when you really read it. God comes to Gideon, and Gideon is a wine press. He's down inside a wine press. Now, he's not pressing wine. He's in a wine press threshing wheat. You don't do that down there. You thresh wheat out in the open. You actually drive animals over wheat. You beat wheat. You're trying to get the edible part of the wheat out of the stalk, and if you're up in the wind, then the wind blows all the chaff away, and you're left with some good stuff that you can make bread out of. Well, he's down hiding in a wine press threshing wheat because he doesn't want the Midianites to find him. So that's what he's doing. He's hiding out trying to make some bread. And the angel comes and says, God is with you, mighty warrior. I'm sure Gideon's going, what? Number one, if God is with me, I kind of doubt it. Number two, mighty warrior? I'm hiding in a stinking wine press, beating wheat, trying to make bread. And you're going to call me a warrior. Yes, I am going to call you a warrior. You are God's mighty warrior. Now let me ask you a question. Do you feel like a warrior today? You are. One of the lessons of Gideon is God sees things in you that you don't see in yourself. God sees power in you that you don't see for yourself sometimes. We just got to claim it. It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter if you're a child. It doesn't matter if you're 90 years old. It doesn't matter. All of us are God's warriors. And he goes and says, Gideon, God is with you, mighty warrior. And so begin to see yourself as God sees you and begin to claim that power and realize God is just waiting to work through you. But it starts with how you see yourself, and can you begin to see yourselves in God's eyes? Can you let go of the past? Can you let go of past mistakes? Can we let go of strongholds and begin to see ourselves as God does? Well, Gideon says, all right, if God is with me and I'm a mighty warrior, why is all this stuff going on? Why do I see all this damage and why all this death? And how come we can't grow nothing? And why am I hiding in this stinking wine press? And yeah, all those miracles you're talking about, I hadn't seen any of those lately. That stuff about the plagues and the locust and all the stuff going on in Egypt, I hadn't seen much of that. And God says, all right, Gideon, I'm going to take you and I'm going to send you to redeem your people. And Gideon's answer is what Jan just read. Wait a second. I'm of a little old tribe, of a little old clan, and I'm the smallest guy in the clan. What on earth? God uses people that don't expect to be used. And God is just waiting to use all of us individually and collectively to honor Him. We just got to be willing. He says, I'm going to use you to save your people. And he says, all right, well, I got to have a sign. He's into signs. We're going to find that out a little bit later. He says, all right, I got to have a sign. What I need you to do is, Mr. Angel, I need you to wait right here while I go get together a sacrifice. Now, time was just a suggestion back then. They weren't so uptight as us, and they didn't have their daily planners, and they were patient, so the angel says, all right, I'll wait. I think he was probably from West Texas. Y'all spend much time in West Texas? West Texas is something, man. You can go into a grocery store in Muleshoe, Texas, and the checker lady will say, where are you from? Well, I'm from Midlothian. Where's that? That's south of Dallas. Oh, I know some people in Dallas. I wonder if you know them. Probably do. And you can sit there and talk for 45 minutes getting a pack of gum in West Texas. Out in West Texas, I've literally gone to do 8-hour seminars for teachers, and they're paying me pretty good for those seminars. And I've had the superintendent say at lunchtime, you tired? Well, not really. I'd really like to go fishing. You want to call her a day and go fishing? Sure, let's go do it. It's just, they're just patient out there. And so I think probably this angel was from Muleshoe. But anyway, he waits, and then finally Gideon comes back. Now it's been a while because Gideon went and slaughtered a goat, prepared the goat, cooked the goat, made some bread, got the broth off the goat, brings it all back, says, all right, I got it. And the angel says, all right, go and take your goat and take your bread, pour out your broth, and stick it on that rock right there. And so Gideon goes and sticks it on the rock, and the angel takes his staff, and he touches the rock, and whoosh, man, a huge fire takes out all of the stuff that Gideon brought. So now Gideon's fired up, and he knows this is really the voice of God. And now he's told, what I want you to do is I want you to go to town, and your daddy built an altar to Baal. His daddy, Joash, is a false god worshiper, and he's got an altar for that, complete altar. And so he says, I want you to go take your daddy's second bull, and I want you to go destroy that altar. Sometimes in our lives, we got to leave the sins of our daddies behind. Sometimes in a family, you got to look and say, this is what Dad did or this is what Mom did, but it's not right. Sometimes in a church, we got to look at our forefathers and say, wonderful, loving, fantastic folks, but I got to leave that behind. Or, got to carry that on. But he says to Gideon, you go destroy that altar. Now, after you destroy the altar, what I want you to do is I want you to take the poles that were part of that altar. You're going to use that as kindling. You're going to build another altar to me. You're going to take that bull and you're going to sacrifice it on that altar. And Gideon goes and he gets some help and he does just that. But guess what? He doesn't do it in the daytime. He goes in the middle of the night, okay? You know, that he still hadn't grabbed a hold of that mighty warrior thing. And so he sneaks out in the middle of the night, makes his altar, burns his bull, and does what he's supposed to do. Wonderful lesson. God gives us time to grow. Just go do what God asked you to do. Realize he sees you as a mighty warrior, and if you don't swing the sword too good, he'll wait on you a while. And so he knows that Gideon's got to grow. Well, the people of the town see one altar's been burnt down, torn down. The other altar's been built. There's a dead bull up there burnt and scorched on it. All the Asherah poles have been used for kindling, and they are upset. So they want to kill old Gideon. So they go to the home of his daddy, Joash, and they want to kill him. And Joash, I don't know, he came to his senses, I guess. He said, why are you going to kill my boy? If Baal's God, he can kill him himself. Well, that's a pretty good argument. So they decide to leave him alone, and Gideon's fired up. So Gideon calls this army together. Man, he gets a big one. Everybody comes out of the woodwork because they're tired of these Midianites. So he gets a great big army together, and he's ready to go fight. But he's a little slow. So he says, all right, God, I'm ready to do this right here. I am fired up, but I got to have a sign. I just got to hear from you. That thing with the goat was pretty good. I was all right, but I think I got to have another one. Well, all right, Gideon, what do you need? Gideon says this, all right, in the bottom of the wine press, he kind of likes that wine press. I'm going to go to the bottom of the wine press, and I'm going to lay out a fleece. I'm going to lay out a goat skin. Or a lamb, wool, sheepskin. I'm going to lay out this fleece, and what I'm looking for is, if in the morning, everything around the fleece is dry, but the fleece is wet, then I'm going to know that I'm supposed to go do this thing. And so the next day he gets up, and the fleece is soaking wet. In fact, it's got so much water in it, he squeezes it out, and he gets a whole bowl full of water. And he says, all right, that's pretty good right there. I think I got it. But don't get mad at me, God. I'd kind of like one more sign. Y'all ever done that to God? Or have you ever asked God for something, he didn't give you the answer you wanted, so you said, I don't think you heard it, maybe I didn't say it right. I better pray that one more time. You know, it's like the lady that wants to leave her husband and says, God, I just want to know if I can leave my husband. And the resounding answer comes back, no. And she says, well, okay, I need to ask one more time. If my husband does this kind of, and just you're always looking for something else. Well, Gideon is just, he's a little scared. All right, God, that fleece thing was pretty good. Don't get mad at me. Be patient with me. I need one more. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put another fleece down, and I'm going to pray. And tomorrow morning, if the fleece is dry, but everything around it is wet, then I'm going to know that you're God, and I'm going to go do what you want me to do. Well, the next morning, the fleece is dry. Everything around him is wet, so he's ready to go. Learn this from God, folks. God is so patient with us. God is just waiting on us to grow, and he's patient with us, and he knows our insecurities, and he knows what your doubts are, and he knows what you think you can and can't do. But through God, all things are what? All things are possible. And so trust God. So Gideon's ready to go, and he's got this gigantic army, okay? So he's got what, 32,000 troops. He's got a huge army, 132,000, I don't remember. He's got a huge troop out there. I know how many leave. And God says, you got way too many men. I think it's 32,000. You got way too many men. I don't need that many. Because if you go to battle and y'all win with that many men, they're going to think you did it. And so the message goes to the troops, if you're scared, go home. Well, that's all some had to hear, boy. Yeah, I'm scared, brother. I'm shaking to death. I'm going home. I'm going to the house. And so 22,000 leave. Scared guys. Now there's 10,000 left, so you had 32,000. Now there's 10,000 left, and God says, that's still way too many. So I got to get rid of some, because if you win with 10,000, y'all going to get to thinking you did it. So we got to call these fellows out. And so what he does, what God says is, have them go get a drink of water in Herod, this pool of water. Now, David's going to show you a picture. That thing is still there, okay? It's called Gideon's Cave, and that spring of water still exists today. That cave is a whole lot bigger than you're getting an image of. Now there's a state park there, and there's pools of water all around it, but that's exactly where this happens. Many armies went there and prepared themselves for battle, filled up their jugs or their wine flask and things with water, getting ready for war. Well, that's where they go. And so God says, tell all your men to get a drink. Now, I'm just going to tell you straight up, you're going to have to be a Hebrew scholar to understand exactly what all happens this day, all right? And I'll tell you the full effect when I'm done. God says, tell everybody to drink water, and I'm looking for those that lap like a dog, okay? Now, for one thing, that's kind of impossible. Y'all watch the dog drink water? If you watch for one, it's sloppy. They're not very efficient drinkers. But for another thing, if you watch real close, their tongue folds backwards. Doesn't go frontwards like you're thinking. It goes backwards and makes a little bowl, and they go blah, 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 and they can pull it up backwards like that. So you can't exactly drink like a dog unless you got a really talented tongue, okay? But God's looking for something else. Now, you can take this a whole lot of ways. One way you can say, well, there were some guys laid flat on their belly and stuck their face in it to get some water out. Maybe some got down on their knees and they were pulling it up like this. All of your versions are going to say something different. Some will say they lapped like a dog. The best probably interpretation is there were some that got down, but they pulled the water up with their hand and they drank it out of there, lapping like a dog. Whatever the point may be. And some want to make this thing and they say, well, what's happening is God was looking for those that would get their water and stand up like a man and be aware and look around and drink while they're being aware. And so what God is doing is he's getting the toughest, most alert soldiers so that they'll be ready to fight. Well, now you're right back to the ability men. And then some said, well, he wants those that stuck their face in that lap like a dog because they're probably pretty stupid. And if you win a war with 300 stupid guys, that gives glory to God. Folks, give that up. You ain't never going to figure that out. When we get to heaven, you can go meet Gideon someday and say, what was up with the dog thing? All right? But the point of the whole thing is God's just cutting it down to 300. But think if you were one of the 9,700 that got sent home. How tough would that be? I mean, you go back to mom and dad and they're all bragging because their son's in the war and he's a soldier, and you get home and say, well, I'm home. Well, what are you home for? Well, I didn't make the army. Well, you got flat feet or something? No. Flunk your physical? Mm-mm. Can't swing a sword? Nope. Well, why are you home? I don't drink right. So there you are. Whatever it is, you got filtered. And so now it's time, and they're going to go fight the Midianites, and they're going to do it at nighttime. It's a great story, isn't it? It'd be a wonderful movie. They're going to do this thing at nighttime, and God says to Gideon, hey, you still scared? Well, obviously he is. And so he says to Gideon, if you're still scared, what I want you to do is go sneak in the Midianites' camp. Now, understand there are uncountable soldiers and so many camels down there, you can't even number them. Go down into the Midianites' camp and just listen to them. Now, understand what he just told him. You scared? Yeah, okay, go to their camp by yourself. I mean, wow. All right, so you're going to send me right into the middle of everybody. Well, you can take your servant with you. So he goes down into the Midianite camp and he listens to people talk, and there's these two guys talking, and one of them says, you know, I had a dream last night. Well, did you? Yeah, I did. Well, what was your dream? Well, I dreamed a great big loaf of barley. A round loaf of bread, okay? Y'all ever go to Panera Bread and they got them big round ones you can buy, you know, $72, you can get a big loaf of bread, you know. And so he said, well, I dreamed there's this big old loaf of bread and it rolled through camp, just destroyed my tent. That's not that scary to me. I mean, yeah, some barley went down my sidewalk and hit my house. I don't know, but it freaked them out. And so the other guy says, well, here's the interpretation of that dream. Gideon's going to come in here and kill all of us. And Gideon goes, okay. So he goes back. It's the middle of the night. They've changed watches in the Midianite camp. And Gideon gets his soldiers ready to go. He gives them M16s, howitzers, and Sherman tanks. No. Spears and swords and knives. Bows and arrows. Nope. He gives them all a trumpet, shofar if you want to. He gives all 300 of them a shofar, a big clay pot with a torch in it. There's their weapons. And so they surround the camp, 300 of them, and Gideon says, listen to me, do what I do. And after a bit, 100 of them blow their trumpets, then the other 200 join. Then they break their clay jars, they hold up their torches, and the Midianites look and think, if they got that many torch bearers and that many horn blowers, there must be 100,000 of them out there. And they get so flipped out because God confuses them, and they start killing each other. They start turning on each other, and now the other Israelites around hear about this. It's not just 300 anymore. All the Israelites start coming, and they're going to fight, and they kill two of the biggest leaders, Oreb and Zeb. Where do you get these names? I mean, these stories of the world, the Bible's greatest stories. Wow, Oreb and Zeb. And so they catch Oreb and Zeb, and then there's two more they want to go catch, so they go to chasing them, and they come to a place called Succoth. Wouldn't you like to live in that town? Okay, so they come to Succoth, and they're hungry. And Gideon says, hey, we're chasing these two guys. We need some bread. And the guy said, look, you might as well have their hands right now. You're chasing them. You wiped them out. We ain't giving you any bread. He said, oh, I'm telling you what. I'm going to go catch those two kings, and when I get back, I'm bringing thorns and desert briars, and I'm going to work you guys over. So then he goes to a place called Peniel, and he says the exact same thing. I need some bread for my soldiers. And they respond exactly the same way. We ain't giving you any bread. And so he says, when I get back from catching those two kings, I'm going to tear your tower down. And so he goes off, and he catches the kings. He's only got 15,000 men left. 120,000 have been killed. Kills them all, catches the two kings. On the way back, he sees a boy from Succoth. And he says, hey, I need to understand your leadership. And the boy gives them the names of 77 elders of Succoth. And so he goes back, and he takes the elders of Succoth out, and he wears them out with thorns and briars. That would not be much fun. Think of mesquite trees. We're back in West Texas. You take a mesquite tree and get yourself with one of those thorns. It hurts. So then he goes back to Peniel, and he destroys their tower just like he said he was going to, and kills every man in the town. The Bible can be graphic sometimes. And then he takes these two kings, and he says, hey, I want to know who you killed, because he wants to be merciful and let them live. He says, who'd you kill? And they said, guys that were princes just like you. And now he knows he killed my brothers. So he kills them, takes their camels, takes all the jewelry off of their camels, takes the jewelry off, and then the people come to Gideon and say, hey, man, would you please, we just want you to be our king. And Gideon says, I'm going to be your king. Neither will my sons be your king. However, I'm going to take a tribute. Mistake, Mr. Gideon. Now, he'd already told them when they took the lamps and when they took the torches and the horns, he said, I want you to shout out loud, for the Lord and for Gideon. Oh, leave that Gideon part out. Just shout for the Lord. He's already claimed some honor among himself. Now he tells them, I want you to all take a earring from the plunder, because every time you killed somebody, you take all their stuff off. Now, the Ishmaelites liked to wear earrings, which was an affront to God at that time. But he says, I want all of you to give me an earring from your plunder. And they do. Now, that doesn't count. It doesn't count what they've already taken off the camels. That was gold too. But I want you to think for a minute. Think of your gold earrings. And they're little ones. They're not the dangly ones. The littler ones. How many of those gold earrings would you have 45 pounds of gold? How many thousands would it take? All of those came off a dead person. A lot of folks died for what he's getting. And he makes an ephod out of the 45 pounds of gold. Now, what's an ephod? Well, here's another one I can't tell you exactly, okay? Now, the high priest had ephods back in the day, and that was a garment that the high priest wore. It had gold and scarlet and blue and different colored ribbon in it. It had solid gold woven through it. Well, he makes an ephod, and some would say, well, he actually made an idol out of it. But it could have been a lot of things, but one of the things it could have been is what you're looking at. An ephod that weighed 45 pounds just with the gold in it. It probably would have had jewels in it. And he created this thing as a symbol probably for the victory of that day, but unfortunately, the Israelite people started worshiping it. Gideon made a mistake. He donated a new ward on the hospital, but he put his bust of his head in it. He donated a gymnasium for the new school and had his picture put outside. And it became a curse to his family. Because people would come to town, and rather than sacrificing on the altar that he made and sacrifice the bull, they would come to worship at the ephod. Nonetheless, in spite of all of that, after he's there, after this, they have 40 years of peace. Learn, church. God can do great things with flawed people. And God can overcome our mistakes. And God can make crooked paths straight. That's what he does with Gideon. And Gideon goes on, and he's got wives, and he's got concubines, or as little kids like to say, porcupines. He's got a whole lot of wives and porcupines, and he has 70 sons. And with one of his concubines, he has a son named Abimelech. And Abimelech, after they all grow up, Abimelech wants to be a judge. Actually, he wants to be a king, and he wants to be a ruler. And there's 70 sons that are trying to rule. And so what Abimelech does, and this is another story for another day, but what Abimelech does is he kills all of his brothers except one. Kills all of his brothers on one stone. What that means is the great Gideon's son sacrificed his own brothers so that he could rule. Well, after he does that, he begins to rule, and he's totally evil. He's an awful human being. He's as bad as it gets. And he was going off, and he went to Shechem. He was having battle with people that put him in office. And he got this style of fighting where people would go hide in a tower. So he and all of his followers would put limbs off of trees outside of the tower and light it on fire, and all the people in the tower would die. Well, he was going to do that at another place, and they were putting their limbs underneath the tower, and a lady on top took a millstone, which probably weighed 200 or 300 pounds, worked it off, and that thing falls off the tower and smacks him in the head. Now, that man must have one strong tater. I mean, when you can drop a 200-pound, 300-pound stone on your head off a tower and you're still talking, that's pretty amazing. Split his skull wide open. It's in the Bible. And he says to his boy soldier, his servant, here's what he says: "Get your sword and kill me, because I don't want anybody in history to say I was killed by a woman." True story. And so he gets run through. And here's the final stuff. I want you to know what Abimelech means. The name Abimelech means the son of a king. Gideon named his boy the son of a king. The very thing he said he wouldn't do, the very thing he said his sons would not do, he named his boy as if he were a king. And that boy grew up to believe he was supposed to be a king. And because of it, he killed all of his brothers except one. And here's how I want to end it. Be careful with what you say. And be careful with what you do, because you can speak reality into existence with your words. If all you ever do is tear down your spouse and speak evil of them, you will bring into existence a horrible marriage and a horrible relationship. If you badmouth church all the time and you're always against everything and everything's negative, then you're going to bring negativity into existence in God's kingdom. If you feel bad about yourself and you're always doubting yourself and you think of what you can't do rather than you can do, then you will bring that reality into existence. If you're always positive and you're building people up and you're always encouraging somebody and you're always seeing the best in people and always speaking nice and lovingly, then you're going to bring love into existence through your words. Speak truth into existence. Abimelech's name was son of a king. And he tried to bring it into existence and he destroyed everything around him. Careful, little mouth, what you say. Careful, little hands, what you do. And we can learn from Gideon that God is just waiting to use us. And every time he looks at you, God says, I'm with you, mighty warrior.
Wow. Did you learn something new today? What a lesson. You know, Acts chapter 8 tells the story of the Ethiopian eunuch, a man who traveled over 1,000 miles to learn about Jesus and to be baptized. I've often wondered what happened after he became a Christian. Well, this month's Archaeology magazine tells the story of Ethiopia. He was from Ethiopia. Tells the story of that black-skinned generation. Ethiopia and Africa, for the next 1,000 years, led the world in Christianity. Far more Christianity is there by multiple than any place else in the world. Archaeologists have today dug out in archaeology some of the largest churches the world has ever known. Under that ground, under that sand, all these things are being discovered. Always like Paul Harvey and the rest of the story. Next time you read about the Ethiopian eunuch in Acts 8, remember what happened to his country. For 1,000 years, they paced the world in leading followers to Jesus Christ. Father, we thank you for the little things that you can make big things. Father, help us be a tongue, a finger for you in the little things. And may God keep doing the great things. In Jesus' name, amen.